So welcome, a very warm welcome to all of you who have come together in this 1 hour interaction. Focus on rethinking materialism. The shift towards a more just, peaceful and sustainable society will require attention to a harmonious dynamic between the material and the non-material or moral dimensions of consumption and production. We're going to focus on rethinking materialism in this very interactive online session. And the concept here is to really rethink materialism. We want to go beyond the concept and the discourse of materialism being good or bad. We're pretty sure too much is definitely not right. But we do not want to just limit ourselves and just focus on this concept of materialism. What we want to do is to go and move beyond that and really look for a dynamic between the two. I think it's a given that business needs to make a profit, and business needs to go forward and balance the material needs with the spiritual ones. As human beings, we need to eat, live, housing, and all of that. So we cannot just be spiritual. We're looking for a harmonious, dynamic coherence between the two. And that's really the essence of our concept of rethinking materialism that we want to cover in this time that we'll be spending together. I think all the people on this call would agree. We definitely need to rethink materialism and to bring a spiritual balance or spiritual material balance to our workplaces. In the past session, we actually asked people, very spiritual and elevated people, about how would you rate your workplace? You can see some 18% of people actually said yes, and actually a few was more spiritual than material even, which is even better. But actually the vast majority of people still our workplaces are not balanced at all. In fact, quite the contrary. So what is being highlighted that beyond the wish for this to be the case, the truth is at the moment, it's not possible for us to have these workplaces. So how do we move forward? How do we go beyond this and move into a more balanced step? So this is the challenge that we're facing today. That's just to get this feeling of who is coming from where today in this call. From the UK, Canada's represented, Geneva. So this gives us a good idea of where people are coming from. So definitely a very international audience. Please go ahead. Just interested and curious to see what are the roles of people who are now in this call. As you can see, the options are from students about to start a hopefully meaningful career, retired individuals who are started a meaningful career. If you're a young professional, if you're a CEO or a company owner, if you're the director or a senior professional kind of role, entrepreneurs are their business, a social innovator. I would guess that most people are social innovators. So what we see right now, there's quite a good balance. Most people would see themselves as professionals. There's quite a few company owners or CEOs. And then there's a good balance of people from a wide spectrum. And that's very typical of ebbf, actually. The people that come to ebbf are generally individuals that really have a common wish, which is really to build a future, using their companies, using the organizations to build a future, to build a better future, hopefully. But really, they come from all over the different spectrums of work and life and ages. So the first question, what we're going to do today, basically focus on this action-based reflection concept. So action without reflection can be pretty pointless and not very helpful and definitely will not improve. Action is important, but reflection after the action is just as important. We invited you to bring to your office a question, a difficult question, which was without any sense of judgment or anything, to actually bring to your workplace the question, what are the underlying assumptions that move you, that move this organization? We want to understand how materialism has become so predominant. And before we can make any kind of change, we need to understand these underlying assumptions. What started this process? Why is it moving in this sort of direction? We will start to hear your experience of the outcomes of workplace conversations. And in the second part, we will hear from you, what did you learn? Or where have you been learning about the underlying assumptions of the people in your workplace? So first question, did you actually manage to ask in your workplace about materialism? Do you manage to engage people, your colleagues, people around you, and ask them that question? So it's kind of encouraging to see that quite a few people have asked that question. I would like to ask the people, especially those that did not manage to do it as much as they would have liked to, is, so what stopped us from asking that question? what was it that we were missing? I think everybody on this call is looking for a way to transition towards a more balanced workplace, organization, company. So what might have stopped and miss you? The reason why we're asking this is to learn and to understand. It is my experience, I'm not sure what you felt, that actually very few people are actually able or feel confident or dare or want to start this conversation. So by understanding what stops you, we can maybe find levers for other people to use. So that's another sad but all too common workplace, which is one where people do not speak and share a lot. In fact, I was talking with one of the conference speakers recently, preparing for their keynotes, how little the workplace has changed. We have this image of all these 1900s photograph or black and whites with all these people on their desks typing away, rows and rows of people just typing on their typewriters. And amazingly enough, in 2019, we actually find that a lot of people are actually in the same position. The cubicle may be different, the workplace may be different, but we're still with a head on computer, everybody in their cubicle, with very little conversation. So it's amazing how little we've actually progressed. Again, we're just curious, we're just learning from each other. At the BBF, it's famous that we have no gurus, no super experts, but we do have a lot of people that are passionate about moving forward. So any input from you will be really welcome.
Hi, it's Samantha. So my comment was the one about getting permission. So in a large organization, I just find that you can't just ask, it's weird, but you just can't ask people questions that you want. You have to be you're in a work environment, don't interrupt people. I would think, who do I contact? Do I have to contact the ethics group? How do I get access to a large group to be able to survey? Would I just survey my friends, the people that I know?
The exercise was to go to our offices and start individual discussions or group discussions on materialism.
Whichever we preferred, whichever means we thought was best.
So it could have been at a break talking privately to a colleague, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Oh.
It doesn't have to be a formal structure of things, and we need to find the best way. So there's no right or wrong way forward. In some organizations, we want to start a structured process, and therefore it's more of a professional, well thought through process. In other cases, you just want to start the conversation. Why are you my colleague? Why is this department, in a more informal way? So there's no right or wrong. We're just exploring different means through which to start these conversations.
Good morning. This is San Francisco. It's kind of interesting because many, especially in the realm of banking, banks want to present that picture that they are very aware of green movements, let's say transformation society, and that they are major contributors to that movement, to that paradigm. So in effect, it's almost that conversation can be had on a personal level, but bringing that to a higher forum seems to indicate that we're questioning the real, say, motives of the bank. Our bank is now funding lots of green projects. They are awarding millions of dollars to entrepreneurs and so forth, and emphasizing sort of that non-values, if you will, oriented areas of society. So it's kind of hard to define materialism when they are indicating that they are actually now contributing to societal transformation. How would I be able to sort of phrase that in a way that it goes beyond just that sort of those small programs or actually large programs?
That's a very good question, which is similar to the one that was written before about, I'm not sure about the definition of. So before asking and starting that question, how can we give it a language? How can we start to define it? How is the best way to start the conversation giving the right accent? And I wonder if somebody in the call has some ideas on how that definition can be introduced.
What I did was I attended a meeting, which was a meetup, an international meeting with about 40 different people from about 15 different nationalities. And I managed to interview 14 people on that question. What I discovered, what was interesting, was that it made me think, what is the definition of materialism? So I looked it up and I ended up with two different definitions of materialism. The first one I came across was a tendency to consider material possessions as more important than spiritual values. The second one is a bit more general. It says the theory or belief that nothing exists except matter and its movements and modifications. Most businesses are based on some sort of material, aren't they? like a product of some kind, for example, or a set of services, which is a little less material. There's a pursuit of material reward from that.
And I think that's necessary. I think we all agree that that is it's a for-profit organization, so profit and materialism has to be part of that. There's nothing wrong at all with that. But exactly as you say, it is purely materialistic. It's just the easy way forward. It seems to be the way that seems to be easier to measure as well, because in companies need to measure. The materialist element, the KPIs there are very easy to actually move forward and to measure. And therefore it becomes the easiest way forward to see progress, to see remuneration, to see, yes, I'm doing well because I can measure how that is progressing, while spiritual, non-material elements are more complex and require a real struggle, a real wish, a real passion to move forward in that sense. And therefore being more difficult in today's time, they're probably curtailed somehow.
I made it simple for myself. I just sent an email to a few colleagues and I posted on my LinkedIn and my Facebook the question. Quite a few people came back and they said, I don't understand the question. I said, what that means to you, kind of like what it sums up, that people, as we further the conversations, they realize that there's materialistic goals and material needs, personal and organizational. So from then on, we kind of make more and more distinguishing what really matters and what's missing. So it was very, very fruitful. I was so grateful to have all these conversations. Very powerful question.
What you're saying just also brings me back to the whole concept of thinking. So great, you give me a definition, I read it, yeah, that makes sense, next. But actually making an effort to understand exactly the question you asked them. They said, okay, what do you mean by materialism? You didn't answer them, you just pushed them to think, what does it mean to you? So that's where you go deeper, and that's when you really start to understand, and then you start to rethink other things as a consequence. So I would love to see these initial conversations, not just giving us answers, but encouraging a deeper learning, a deeper reflection through which change can then happen.
I think also what helped me, because I actually asked for help. I said, I'm preparing for this conference and I'm just looking for some information. Where are we as individuals, as organizations, as society? What do we know about it? What do we don't?
So the humbleness of your posture. Sometimes we ask questions which are veiled threats, or people feel threatened by that kind of question, like, why do you follow materialistic goals? And you cage up and you don't really express yourself. But the way you pose is, I need your help. Can you help me understand? I want to learn. So the way you also pose the question makes a big difference in terms of the outcome. So I think that's a very important element, because sometimes we want to walk in and just transform organizations, the people around and so forth. We want to elevate them. We want to save their lives. We want to do something beautiful, but actually we become a threat. We become something negative. And that was the next question I was going to ask.
I would also ask the question of why should we think it's either or? Even though the dictionary definition is the tendency to consider material possessions more than spiritual ones, I would ask the question whether it's either or the answer is what is the best balance? And that makes a big difference, because there is an element of materialism in everything we do, for the very simple reason that we have a body. And then there is spirituality in everything we do, because we have a spirit. The happiness, and whether in a company, whether in our physical life, personal life, is the balance, not so much the opposition between the two. And that allows also more expressions of all the degrees that you have from one to another, rather than one or the other.
And that's exactly what we're aspiring towards. But unfortunately, vast majority of people that work all say the same thing, that right now they're looking for exactly the balance that you encourage and we all want to make happen. But the truth is, right now, our workplaces are moving more and more, faster and faster towards the needle is going towards the one side, which is obviously negative for everything.
I find it interesting in the workplace that there seems to be an understanding that people are going to have to come first. So a lot of focus is, so I used to work for a very large tech firm, and the whole mantra for the last year or two became customer love. So making sure that the customer is served and all about serving their needs and making them feel good. So on the one hand, it seems like an elevated perspective saying, let's serve them, let's make them happy, let's be the best we can be for them. But in reality, it's really so that they get more sales, so that the people are attracted to them more and stay there longer. So it's kind of interesting how the one is being used for the other purpose.
And I wonder what the first reactions are when you know, for the first time you start and you open up some such conversations.
Well, I was a coach within my workplace, and what I found is, and the people I coached ranged from millennials to, you know, the winner of the top woman award at work. And what was interesting is that nobody talked about material gain during our coaching session. They were talking about things that they wanted to fix, they wanted to shift, they wanted to have a positive perspective, or they wanted to bring more joy into their life, they wanted to take an art class, have more time for their family. It all had to do with sort of them as people as opposed to any kind of material achievement. And that's over a 2-year period. I haven't heard anybody talk about a material achievement. In fact, I was so moved because one of my first was a millennial, and here he is. He's a young guy, very successful in a tech firm, and he said, you know, I just feel like I want to do more for the world because I'm in a position to do so compared to other people. And I thought, that's incredible. This guy must be 24 years old, and that's his perspective.
Anyone else that would like to mention what the first reaction when you started one such conversation about understanding the underlying assumptions that push the material?
One of the first replies I got, the first person said to me, materialism is not the main aim in life. Well, I explained why I was asking the questions first, so it wasn't a real problem. Everybody was eager to answer. And what was more interesting was that when I left these people behind to go to the next person, they continued the conversation with their people next to them. It sparked off a discussion, in fact.
You opened the floodgates.
Yes. Yeah, the whole table was talking about it by the time I had finished.
Because sometimes also in our mindset, we are waiting before to have one such conversation because, oh, what's he going to say? What is she going to say? What they're going to think and so forth. So being better prepared for the reactions, both good and bad, because I don't assume that every conversation went wonderfully well. I'm sure there were some negative reactions. So really curious to hear first reactions when you introduce this kind of conversation, this kind of question in your workplace.
So I discussed it with a couple of my colleagues who are all consultants and coaches and facilitators. They immediately asked, what do you really mean? Right. What is behind? They giving me that look like, we know you, there's, you know, what do you really wanna know? And then I said, well, it's just this question. And so they leaned back and said, okay, then let's think about it. And I got very positive reactions because it was beginning of the year. So people think, oh yeah, we want to do everything different. It went like up and down, kind of, you know, going back and forth between very much towards the spiritual and the fulfillment, and then going directly into the other area again. Okay, but there is a huge need. So, and it was always a reflection talking about themselves and linking it back to family or co-workers. So that was very interesting to see.
I wrote that,
okay.
And people were confused and they said, we don't understand the question, or what about the spiritual, or not necessarily using the word spiritual, but like, hey, there's something else, something more. And I says, okay, let's slow down. This is going to be a longer term learning together, and we need to start somewhere. So right now we're starting, how do you understand what role plays in your life? What role should play or should not play? We just expand and understand that this is just a starting point.
And the starting point did not worry them, because if you tell me this is a starting point of something longer, then it's, oh, where is this going to go? So but this is just me, so it's interesting. That's my initial reaction to one such point.
But because it's not mandatory for those who are already engaged and interested, or showed, you know, that they want to move forward and explore more because they have ideas that there's something's missing. And I says, yes, we're going to go there. To my understanding, this is what I'm learning too. Kind of sharing more of my own experience in this learning together. And it's like I became a member of this wonderful community. I'm sharing what I'm learning, and this kind of thing I need from you as the feedback for my own understanding and growth.
And I wonder if there were any settings that allowed you to be more successful in the kind of questions that you asked and things you were proposing. Is there something that do you choose a specific setting or a location or wording or something that made it easier for this to actually go forward? Coffee break room, lunch room, the informality of it, obviously it's probably conducive to something positive. After work, still in the office, but no distractions. One's living room, that's something positive you can have virtually or inviting people. The home is obviously a place where things, the kitchen is supposed to be one of the best places to have these kind of conversations whilst you're cooking or doing things with people. In fact, companies do have these experiences where people cook together. And it's interestingly enough, something special happens when people put the ingredients together to prepare a meal for themselves or for others. So that could be another environment that can be used. What do you mean by excited or upset about the things in life?
Well, when people are exciting, you ask what is working. Just kind of digging for awareness. What creates excitement? What are we really excited about? Do we notice those things? Or if we're upset, again, what is it? What gets us to that state? And how can we get out of it? What's missing? What's needed? What support? Just really looking for the awareness, not just the reaction. Oh, I'm upset. Or I'm so excited, but like, oh, how do you create that excitement again for yourself and for others?
So you're starting from an emotion, a strong emotion, positive or negative, and you allow that emotion to fill with meaning, to understanding. It becomes a transformational moment because you're really harnessing, in the good sense, try to repeat it, in the bad sense, to understand where it started and try to, I imagine, understand and fathom it. I find when I have these kind of conversations, I'm usually in co-working spaces. So these are spaces where you're not in your usual place. So there's an element about being in an office space, the usual office space, the usual area, where things become in a certain way. There's another thing about co-working spaces, because it's not your office, it's a place that you share with many other people, diverse people from different companies, that in itself creates a more open mind, a more open mindset. So it's kind of interesting that people from in these co-working spaces really have a different attitude, and these conversations seem to be easier. Alex, welcome from Brazil. Do you have any comments, Alex, about how you started these conversations in a good or a bad way in the location? So what changed? Great, you had this conversation, you asked these questions. What happens afterwards? Did anything change? Did you perceive something different from the before and after?
So my experience was a little bit of maybe crisis and victory, because I raised the question when we were in our group hub. You know, we have a team that sits around a shared office and a supervisor that sits nearby. And I posed the question conversationally in the morning when we were all back, and just really threw it out there as, hey, I've been asked to do this thing, and what do you guys think? Just sort of honestly. The interesting thing was, our team dynamic is we're kind of dominated by one person who, always dominates the conversation. So immediately began to answer, and then continued to just listen to himself speak, and took the conversation in the direction that he wanted. Later on, I tried to raise it again, and at this point he'd lost interest, and so really shut down the conversation and spoke about what he wanted to. And so I would say then what changed was the fact that I brought it up twice. And so the other colleagues who were, there and were just interested in, why was I asking the question? And so when we were alone, and we could, speak a little bit more, it really became just about how to have conversations with each other in a way that we could listen as much as we spoke and really get views from everyone in the room. And, what I really thought was nice was they echoed something that, I think as well, which is, we have to learn as a team to begin to contribute equally and take away equally. So that might be a little bit off topic, but that's my honest, experience with the conversation, and I'll let you know how it goes the next time.
Definitely on topic, because this is the reality check of what works and what doesn't, and how different approaches work. And this way it's interesting because the one-on-one gave certain results and the group actually gave different results. So usually we saw I was usually better one-on-one, but in this case with this specific individual, not quite. And it's actually the group that came together that brought a new dynamic. So you did ignite something. I mean, there's no zero reaction to an action. There's always a reaction. There's something learned, there's something changed, something moves. It's just being aware of it and just optimizing it. But just being brave and starting the first step. Fantastic, Gigi. Any other comments, surprising things that maybe changed after one such conversation?
I was quite surprised by the diversity of answers I got.
Right. I can find
So
that.
it is a topic which has to be approached from different angles, different directions.
So the diversity, why do you think there was such a diversity? Was it because it was...
because we had a diverse group of people, perhaps.
Right.
We had an age range from about, I would say, 19 to 65. And we had about 15 different nationalities represented. And plus, we had people outside of their normal workplace, so they weren't afraid to say something.
What do you have to say about this fear element? So it's kind of scary sometimes to actually ask those questions.
In my professional life as a trainer, an English trainer, I've been inside companies on a number of occasions. You can get around these problems just by encouraging people to communicate in an open way and not hide behind their fears.
Because you said a very good point. Fear can be something that people really, I fear this and therefore I'm not going to do anything, but it can also be as an excuse. I better not.
If your line manager is present and you say something which you may think might be out of keeping or out of order, something you wouldn't normally say in their presence, it's a problem.
Shared quotes even. So was the shared quotes a starting point or something that came from the people that you interacted with, whoever wrote this?
That was me. So
okay.
People kind of worked on it, they processed the conversation and came up with quotes. So they must have checked the internet. You just out of curiosity, what do others say, was interesting. So we had bits and pieces, some put it on the whiteboard and, things like that. So it's moving people.
And so quotes can be a way to start a conversation. It's not me saying this is the quote that I read from some recognized individual, but it can also be, what is your quote? What is the quote that you would connect with this concept? And that's a deeper study and search for something that fits, because some people cannot express it. So a quote helps them to give an authoritative answer where they feel more comfortable, but it's still the beginning of a conversation. It's just a means through which the conversation can be started without them having to expose themselves directly, instead of using a third authoritative party to actually start the conversation. And so I think we've got to the key question. So we asked all these people with the sincere spirit of learning, humble spirit of learning. We asked them, great, could you tell me what are the needs that you aim to fulfill? Why is materialism thriving so much in this company, this organization, in your lives? What is sustaining it? There's the email you can send us to, which is learning@ebbf.org. So you can send them to that email later and we just make sure they're going to be. So somebody wrote evil, which is kind of, somebody said, I am evil and therefore, or I'm curious to see how the evil came out in somebody replying.
But I just wrote those words down to kind of signal the weird conversations that we were having around this. And I think part of it was not understanding the question, but the defensiveness I felt was captured by the words I put. I actually had evil, denial, and ignorance. So the conversation went sort of in 3 stages, almost like stages of grief. First there really was kind of a denial that this could permeate, the industry that we work in, because it is an industry that's tied very closely to values, but has become heavily commercialized. And so
you work in the sports industry, right?
Right. Yeah. So there's a reckoning and a bit of a tension, trying to reconcile this. And that's when the conversation then turned to those that have come into this, industry, the sector, and exploited it, and they're evil. And then, from there, the tirade continued. And then afterwards, attention to kind of ignorance, right? That there were weak people that weren't, safeguarding the values of the sector. And that basically, more, others who are bad, nothing that, we do, nothing about our assumptions, nothing about the system. The conversation was a bit frenetic, but I thought it was, interesting to type those words in and throw a little bit of fire into the mix.
So I'm identifying a rather toxic work environment that is actually need, of just letting go, of letting steam and so forth. So probably was like, that kind of, and interesting to see what happens next, but it's interesting how much there is a need. I think if there's one underlying feeling that I get from all your reactions, that people need to express themselves, people need to think. They sometimes take it away because it's not so easy, but when the right opportunity is created, the right culture, the right environment, the right, I feel safe here, then it's amazing how people really share what's really important. And all of a sudden the human being in the company comes out and you realize the company is very different from the human beings, the human beings that actually work there. So it's interesting to see how that can be nurtured without disrupting, without threatening, but allowing this, not always pleasant, has to be sometimes difficult transition. So thank you for that. Alain, did you ask anybody around you or around your organization about what sustains materialism?
Yeah, well, I talk about these issues a lot, as you know. I had a conversation recently with an economist, introduced the notion of spirituality in business, how that would manifest, because as a thoroughbred economist, he had difficulty seeing it. Immediately he sort of brought up what we later identified as being a core assumption about economics and what drives economic behavior, that being competition and self-interest as two primary motivators. And if that's your ground zero of economic behavior, then materialism quickly follows. Basically, my point of view was, well, it's nice that there is reason to believe that from a scientific perspective that self-interest and competitions are real factors in economic behavior, but it's not mathematics. They are factors by choice, not factor by natural law, so to speak. And that was sort of the discussion I think we had. I think that's where you can start to tease apart the assumptions that are underlying much of the accepted economic behavior that often is seen as scientific, but really if you dig down deep, then you can start questioning whether this is really natural law or whether it's a series of assumptions that we have, and cultural behaviors or even historical behaviors. And once you go in that direction, you can start unraveling those assumptions. So I think maybe that might be a way to engage people on this matter, to really have them question the underlying, parameters of what economics is.
And interesting, because you say competition, and Mahmoud is next. Competition sounds like something negative, and then you have the whole B Corp movement, which is competing to be the best companies for the world. So the same sense of competition can actually be used in a different way. Competing to be the best company to work for. Competing, so is really using those underlying assumptions and then translating them towards the next phase, which is going to be part of the next calls that we're going to go on. But right now, it's really important to understand why is this going forward. And Mahmoud, do you have a point to make as well?
Precisely about those assumptions. I for 1 minute, I'll go back to one of the earlier conversations we had. The earlier points raised here is that companies are only interested in increasing profit. I believe that's also one of the assumptions that we have to question, because we believe that that is done exclusively and not for any purpose of service. And it's valid to ask the question whether they are there exclusively to make a profit or actually offer a service, a product that does good to others. And that also brings me to think that sometimes you do not need to change a whole lot of things. You can just change a few assumptions and then things become different. And now I come back to your issue of competition. Not only there is nothing wrong with competition, but competition is necessary in order to improve yourself, not to bring down others. The negative aspect of competition in business or in any personal situation is the fact that we want to bring down the other ones in order to excel or compete. If that is not done, the desire to be excellent in all things is a very good motivation. So my point, if I've been able to express it, is that it is also in our attitude towards what we are doing rather than exactly what we are doing, or our attitude in analyzing what others are doing and their intentions.
Mahmoud, thank you very much for these last few words. It's a perfect closing to this session where we explore together and use this action-based reflection to understand better how to move forward.